Okay, so run me through 14. How does a 14, when I'm 14 years old, I'm in high school. What am I doing? I can't even remember what I'm doing in high school. I'm going through the CPS school system, maybe running track and cross country, worried about a girlfriend,
Right.
worried about what me and my friends go do. I'm not thinking about change.
Right. So I'm 14. This is my mother. She's in sex trade. She's selling her body to take care of me and my sister. So I see these criminals coming through our home, our apartment. You know what I'm saying? And I see her going out working at the major lounges and bars in Detroit. This is Detroit now. All right. But my mother only had a ninth grade education, if that much. She probably not that much, but she was a reader. And she knew that her looks got her everything that she wanted. But she really didn't want anything. You know what I'm saying? Jari Amini, the sister that worked with me when I started Third World Press, she has a poem. And the poem is a very short poem. She says that, writes in the poem, I give the brothers anything they wanted if they wanted something. Okay? Our problem is our questions are not about the world, they're about the block. They're about TJ down the street. They're about, just those small things, in many cases, around us. But we never get beyond the west side of Chicago. I grew up on the west side, okay? Or the south side of Chicago, where, we live now, or the lower east side of Detroit, Michigan, or Black Bottom in Detroit, Michigan, okay? But what happened to me at 14, my mother demanded that I go to the Detroit Public Library and check out Black Boy by Richard Wright. I refused at first because I didn't want to go, I hated myself. I hated my color. I hated my living circumstances, our living circumstances. And I did not want to go to a white library and ask a white librarian for a book with black in the title that was authored by a black writer who was supposedly critical of white America, because I hated myself. So she demanded that I go get that book, and I went to the library. Didn't go to the library, and I went to the shelves. I found the book on the shelf, took it off the shelf, went to an unpeopled section of the library and sat down and began to read. Why did she want to read this book? Began to read. I read over half the book that day in the library, went home and went to the room that I shared with my sister and read the rest of the night and finished Black Boy in less than 24 hours. Gave the book to my mother the next day, kissed her on the cheek, and thanked her. I thanked her without telling her this, but now she had introduced me to black ideas. She had introduced me to, through Black Boy, ideas I had no idea existed. All right? I went back to the library that same day and checked out everything that Richard Wright had published. Native Son, 8 Men, White Man Listen, you know what I'm saying? Uncle Tom's Children, all right? And in reading Richard Wright, especially the book of essays, which very few people know anything about, White Man Listen, there was an essay in there on black writers. I read it several times, and I began to write down all the black writers that he referenced in the essay. I'm 14. And each writer, I started reading that writer's books. And at the age of 14, by the time I was 15, I was a different kind of baby. I'm a teenager. I was a different. There's nothing I could talk to you about. So I'm able to get through high school because the brothers who could not write or read and didn't want to write or read, all they want to do is chase the women. But they chasing my sister who looks like my mama. And my sister saying, well, I'm going to get my brother on you. They come to me and they laugh, say, well, what are you going to do? But when they needed some help in their studies, they came to me. Who wants to write the paper? They came to me. All right? So being literate and beginning to love literature But more importantly than that, beginning to understand the power of literature. So that you want to keep it from a black man, put it in the book.
Mm.
Put it in the book. All right. So I found the key to the book. And so books became my answer to getting out of the misery that we're living in. My sister had her first child at 14 years old. She had a second child at 16. She had a third child at 18. By the time she was 27, she had 6 children, 5 different men. None of the men took care of the children, all right, but they all lived with my sister. All right. And so I'm on a mission now. How do I get away from this kind of misery in our lives? And I knew it wasn't through the streets. You can't tell me anything, but I grew up on the streets. All right? We're so poor, I'm wearing used underwear. You don't know what poverty is until all your clothes are coming from Salvation Army or used stores. Okay? That's how poor we were. All right? And it got to a point where my mama began to realize that she can't make no living like this until she began to lose her beauty. And then, of course, men really began to take advantage of her. And so she went out on a date, and at 34, whomever she went on a date with murdered her. They killed her. So we on our own. That's how I ended up back in Chicago, and my sister stayed in Detroit with her baby with my father's people. And I went to live with my father, and he didn't know me. He was a hustler. He was a real criminal, but he was at another level because he ran a numbers wheel in Chicago. So for the first 6 months I'm with him, I'm dropping drawings on South Side and West Side Chicago because he had this numbers wheel. And we ended up partying because he tried to put his hands on me. And once he put his hands on me, I backed him up, and I packed that same day and moved to the YMCA. But I had enough sense to move to the YMCA and get away from him because he's criminal, and get away from him because what? I'm a reader. I'm looking at other worlds. All right, you know that this is not the world you can grow in. You don't control this, okay? And that's so at 14, 15, 16, I graduated from high school, Dunbar High School, and ended up in a magazine selling group, going across Illinois, lying about you, working your way through college and university, trying, selling these magazine subscriptions. Nobody ever told me about going to college or university. But now I'm lying about going to Howard University. Knocked on a door in Springfield, Illinois. A distinguished black man answered the door and said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Well, I'm working my way through Howard University, and had the suit that I buried my mama on and stuff." He smiled at me and said, "Well, young man, come on in here. I'm a Howard University law school graduate." He worked for the state. So within 4 or 5 minutes, he knew that I was not a Howard University student. But rather than jump into my chest, he began to school me, saying, one, knowledge is the only thing nobody can take from you. Number two, think about going to community college. The community colleges are the colleges now that have been brought on. This is 1960. For people who do not have resources, et cetera, et cetera. He said, "Are you hungry?" He said, "I was hungry." He had his wife fix me a sandwich and bring me something to drink. And I said, he bought subscriptions to Ebony and Jet and Post and Look magazines just to help me out, all right? And I got up to leave, and I mentioned this last night. He called me, he said, son. Nobody ever called me son, so he said, "Young man," I turned around, and he pulled out his wallet, $20 bill, and folded in quarters and said, "Put this aside and only use it for emergencies." And that's what I did. So now, here's a black man whom I did not know saved my life. Okay? So that's it. And so culture becomes a part of who we are. And when I opened up last night, I believe I said, I generally do say that one of my missions is to people to understand I love black people. This is not rhetoric. Everything that I built in Chicago, all my work deals with us. I can't write about white people. I'm not white. And I don't want to be white. But I want to be black. But I want to be a black person who makes a contribution to civilization, to the world. Okay? Because we're not just on the south side of Chicago. We're not just on the west side of Chicago. We're not just on the lower east side of lower west east side of Detroit, Michigan, the Black Belt of Detroit, Michigan. We're not. So I'm saying wherever they got us in these cities, that's not us. That's where they parked us and said that's where you're gonna stay. And then they build everything else. This university, this college here, was built by freed white men. Maybe a woman or two, but mainly white men. All right, Lutheran. Okay, it's still here. Why? Because they brought in other people who want to continue to build it, and they built a serious faculty to teach, and who have moved beyond just the first mission of the college, which is to educate white men, to another mission saying, okay, we're going to be a part of the world. That's why you're here. Somebody had to advocate for you to become here. Okay? So that's what we're about. We're trying to build what we call independent black institutions, where our 3 schools in Chicago and our publishing company in Chicago and our foundation in Chicago represent part of that mission. We can only do so much because I don't have the kind of funds or resources that they had here at this college, a place like that. Right. But nobody can say that we have not done our job. We bought a half a block in Chicago, and our headquarters, you can see them, you really can't see it too much here, but that's our headquarters. All right. And when you come to our headquarters, you'll never forget it.
Where's your headquarters located?
7822 South Dobson in Chicago, South Side. And we have one of the best black visual art collections in the world. Right there on the South Side of Chicago.
So, in wrapping this up, I would like to thank you for spending time with me and breaking down what culture means to you and why you chose to stay in Chicago with the book publishing company, and all of the great things that you're doing with the schools and the publishing, the keeping. I know one of the things you spoke about was keeping Gwendolyn Brooks'
yeah,
name.
First black, right. First black to win the Pulitzer Prize.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
You keep her name prominent. You keep it,
absolutely,
in everybody's face. So the things that you're doing are really inspirational and great, and I really appreciate the time that you spent to sit down with me today.
No, well, I appreciate you, son. And Gwendolyn Brooks is one of the major reasons I'm here. It's part of our catalog. And we published 14 of our books. And part of my mission is not only to publish Gwendolyn Brooks, but to publish other great writers also. And not so great writers, and new poets and so forth. And that's what we've been able to do over the last 56 years. And the company was built sustained by black people. And we had this major flood about a year and a half ago that destroyed close to about $190,000 worth of inventory, our books. And I thought that we were finished because the water came up through the basement. And so the city claimed we didn't, that's not our problem, okay? And so I'm not gonna get into the problems, but the major point is that we did a GoFundMe, which I didn't know what a GoFundMe was. My board, you know what Kyrie Irving is?
Yeah.
He gave us $50,000.
The basketball player?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
His father was a reader. He said, we gotta help them. All right. Michelle Bloom, who was black, and she's now the president of the Poetry Foundation. The Poetry Foundation is the major, largest, most influential poetry foundation in America, most certainly. They gave us $20,000. They gave me a major grant, a lifetime grant, about a year before that. Okay. I can go on and on. And I'll just end with this because this is very important. This writer, Edmund Gordon. We published 4 of his books. And we published last year this book on Edmund Gordon, Black Radical Love. Edmund Gordon, Dr. Edmund Gordon, Professor Edmund Gordon is 102 years old. He gave us $10,000. You don't have to do that. But you know that I hardly ever say this, but I'm going to say it now since it's being recorded. I've never taken a salary from Third World Press. I've always taught in the academy. I taught in the academy for 42 years. Okay? My last job was at DePaul University. All right? For 42 years, the academy paid me, so I never had to take a salary from Third World Press, nor my wife. And my wife, Dr. Carol D. Lee, is one of the greatest women in the world. She is now retired from Northwestern University, but she's now the president of the National Academy of Education.
Awesome.
Which many white people are part of, okay? So don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me how you're gonna do it.
Exactly.
That's it.
I
Okay?
like that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, son. Stay strong now.